All right. Well, hi guys. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. My name is Dhruv Singhal, and I'm the founder of Open Gears and a sophomore at Mattia Valley High School in Aurora, Illinois. It's great to see that many of you are interested in listening to the speaker today. And again, I hope this event provides you with new insight and knowledge. I would now like to welcome our speaker, Dhruv Bhargava. He recently graduated from Purdue University with a degree in cybersecurity, and he is also a Mattia Valley alumnus. He has pursued many internships at firms like Crowe LLC, and he recently started a new platform called RootShare. Dhruv has a lot of interesting things to share today, and I hope that through this event you'll learn a lot about the growing importance of cybersecurity and how you can pursue that field in the future. And as always, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can write them in the chat or save them for the Q&A at the end. Thanks so much, Dhruv, for taking time out of your busy schedule to help inspire students to pursue your STEM career. And without any further ado, please give Dhruv a warm virtual round of applause. And Dhruv, you can take
Thanks.
it away.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Awesome.
Let me know if you guys can see that.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Let's check that. All right, so I'll go ahead and start out here with this kind of little presentation I put together. I really want to first say, Drew, thank you so much for putting this together. You know, like I said, I'm a young graduate. I just graduated in December from Purdue. I was a 2016 Mattia Valley graduate, so that seems like a long time ago, but honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. I started pretty late in cybersecurity itself. It wasn't even a major at Purdue till 2017. So that kind of tells you about the field itself, right? It's a confusing, growing field. And I didn't find my spot in cybersecurity, honestly, until I started my senior year of college. So the fact that you guys are interested already in here is a huge step forward from where I was at. And I think it's super important just as a student, right, to know what you want to get into and what you're really getting into in the career. So that's kind of what I've geared this presentation towards. I'm going to talk very little about myself because I see no value in that. I don't think that talking about my accomplishments or my path itself is going to be helpful to any of you because everyone's path looks a little bit different. But what I do kind of want to tell you about is exactly what cybersecurity is. Kind of get rid of any misconceptions you might have, about the field itself. It's not just hacking. It's not just, sitting in front of a computer typing code every day. And then leave it up to you guys for questions because this is a field that it's all about questions, right? In this field, what's going to happen the next day? What's going to change 10, 15 years from now, even 10, 15 days from now. So I'll start out with this slide. Like I said, my name's Drew. Graduated from Purdue University in 2020 in cybersecurity and have a management degree as well. Currently at Crowe, again, LLP, do IT assurance there. So what that is in a nutshell is essentially auditing. We look at different systems and just kind of make sure they meet different requirements. It's not auditing in the traditional sense where, there's federal guidelines or any sort of legislative guidelines yet. It's more of kind of industry standard and best practices, but I'll talk all about that a little bit later here. So like I said, I'm going to talk a lot about what cybersecurity, what does it look like, and kind of what the field is. So here's how I break it down. A lot of people think it's just technology, right? That's really just 1/3 of what the field is. These are the key components because cybersecurity is a vast term. It's an umbrella term that covers so many different aspects of really protecting technology, but you have to remember again that technology is only 1/3 of that field. So you have people, those are the end users. All of us right now are end users because we're all sitting in front of a computer. So you guys all fall in the cybersecurity field and in that realm and in that industry. Processes are kind of what make the whole system go, right? How can we make sure that things are protected? What do we do in the event of a data breach, a hack, any sort of incident that might occur? And then technology is the backbone of the industry, right? I mean, I wouldn't have a job without it. I wouldn't have a major without it. A lot of us would be much worse off if technology didn't exist. So these are the key components. I'll kind of break down a little bit more of what that looks like down the line, but the next slide I've got here, just kind of what the industry looks like. It's a fast growing field. So we don't know what cybersecurity is going to look like I said, 10 years from now. What it did look like, though, was in 2004, this industry was a $9 billion industry, right? It was non-existent. Nobody thought that everyone would have a supercomputer in their pockets. I'm sure you guys have heard the stats, right? Most iPhones and most smartphones are more powerful than the computers that send Neil Armstrong to the moon. So that just tells you about the rate of growth of technology itself. The industry in 2016 was $122 billion. The growth of the industry itself is about 22%. In 2018, after there had been some high level hacks and data breaches and things that were in the news every day, that number jumped to $150 billion. There was over 100,000 jobs open in the market, not enough people to fill them. Like I said, Purdue started the major in 2017. So when I joined it, it was right before this boom happened. Excuse me, right before this boom happened. So 2020 now, this is again a projection, $184 billion is what the industry kind of looks like. And there's a projected job growth rate of 37% per year. So that is far outpacing any other industry in the market right now. Just tells you kind of what your opportunities look like and what the field itself looks like. So these are common terms you'll hear and common threats you'll hear in the cybersecurity industry if you ever get into the field, right? You guys are all familiar with malware, also commonly known as viruses. There's a little stat under each one. So each malware or virus attack costs a company about $2.6 million. So you can see how severe that is. If you're a company that's only doing $10 million a year, you're putting a fourth of your budget aside for a virus or a hack, right? That comes from malware. Identity theft, another common thing. If any of you have a credit card, you've probably been targeted for getting identity theft protection. A lot of people get insurance for that now because it's such a serious thing. So in 2019 alone, there were 13 million victims. That's a large percentage of the population, and you can see it's a serious problem, right? Data breaches. This is probably the most common and unfortunately the most frequent thing that people in cybersecurity deal with, right? 11 billion stolen records since 2008. That is more than the number of people in the world. So just to give you an idea of what amount of data is out there about you, your record on average of anyone on this call has probably been stolen 2 to 3 times. That's just your information you put out on social media, your bank account information that might be in different systems about you. So that's a serious thing. And if you just Google the word data breach for 5 days in a row, you will see a new top story every day because there's a new company that goes through a data breach almost every day. Ransomware is something that's a little bit newer. So you might have heard of seen of this. They were really targeting the healthcare industry, but there's this weird ethical code that hackers and people that are called exploiters follow, is that they don't target vulnerable organizations. It's super weird, but right now they're staying away from healthcare, but healthcare was one of their biggest targets before COVID hit. So every 11 seconds, there was an organization being affected by ransomware. What ransomware is essentially it's a virus that locks your computer or locks your system and says, if you don't pay us $500 or whatever the fee is, we're going to delete everything on your computer. So that might not seem like a big deal to you if you don't have lots stored on your computer, but for hospitals and banks and stuff like that have a lot of records on their computers, this is a huge deal because that's the backbone of their business. If they lose all their records, they're out of luck there. Social engineering is another huge aspect of cybersecurity. What that really entails is manipulating people to do something that they're not aware that they're doing or that they don't want to do, right? So that comes in the form of blackmail, that comes in the form of like the next bullet point says phishing, that comes in the form of just straight up lying to people. So social engineering is how 91% of attacks start, right? You have to convince somebody to give you access to their computer, or give you access to their system. And this is how it all starts. And then phishing is probably the most common thing. You all have probably seen it. If you go to the junk folder in your inbox, there's probably 4 to 5 phishing emails in there every day. But the one thing to note there is those emails do actually successfully target people 60% of the time. So 60% of the time, those people are clicking on those links that say, click here to get a free $1,000, right? You might think that that's dumb, that's stupid, but that's just the way a lot of these things work. And again, that goes back to social engineering. So what do we do about this? That's what the rest of the slides are going to talk about. And then how does the cybersecurity industry play into that? So there's kind of 3 overarching tasks. I've broken them down into 3 that I think would best describe them, but offensive, defensive, and responsive, right? So offensive cybersecurity is what you think of when you think of cybersecurity. It's that hacking. It's that guy that sits behind a computer trying to break into systems. It's those movies where there's the 11-year-old who breaks into NASA, and steals their records and is a computer genius that goes on to work for the FBI. Those are true things. People do that, right? In the industry, it's known as penetration testing, which is testing company or organization's systems and environment to make sure that there's no flaws. This is done on a contractual basis. So we have teams at Crowe that do that. Every organization has teams that do this. It's a very, very common thing for people to do. You may have heard of things called bug bounties. That's where companies like Microsoft, Facebook, they offer you thousands of dollars to find a flaw in their system. And you probably get those notifications on your iPhone every day that says update your iOS now, or it comes out once a month. That's because somebody has identified a bug or a flaw in their system, and they work to fix that with what's called a patch. So this is centered around ethical hacking, which is also known as white hat hacking. It's very common. People do it all the time. Again, you don't have to work for a company to do this. If you're somebody that's experienced and talented enough, you can go for bug bounties. You can just kind of do this on your own. The biggest thing is you always have to make sure you have permission, right? So when I was doing cybersecurity at Purdue, and we learned any of these things, we had to sign a contract that said we wouldn't use this knowledge to maliciously harm other people or other organizations, because they were teaching us how to hack. They were teaching us how to do pen testing. So if you do this and you are not doing it in the proper way, that's when you go to jail. So again, if this is something that interests you, there's a lot of ethical guidelines you need to follow. Just make sure you do your research. Defensive cybersecurity is actively preventing those threats, right? So you're the guy that's working for a company, guy or girl, working for the company, making sure that somebody's not getting in, making sure that somebody's not getting unauthorized access. And they're more commonly known as administrators, so system administrators, network administrators. You also have, they're part of the next thing that I'll talk about, which is a security incident response team. But they utilize best practices to prevent hacks from happening. So again, this means getting your audits done. This means getting your compliance reports in. This means making sure that your system doesn't have vulnerabilities. And a lot of times, defensive and offensive go hand in hand. So you'll hear companies talk about they have a red team and a blue team, right? So red team is your offensive team and the blue team is the defensive team. And they actually pit these people against each other within the company. So you'll have the offensive team from, company A actively trying to break into the company B's system, and company B will send their blue team to get practice to defend against company A. So this is very common in industry. People are always trying to hack each other, but they're doing it legally. Don't ever do this, without proper guidance and proper permission in place. And then responsive, this really is only triggered in the event of an incident. So if there's a hack or a data breach, that's when these people get involved. Typically, there's law enforcement involved now. The FBI is involved in any data breaches. You could have, if there's sensitive information there, the NSA might get involved. If you guys follow the news at all, you probably heard about SolarWinds and that massive hack that happened. So there were thousands, hundreds of thousands of systems affected across the country. And a lot of them were related to the government. So, things that were at risk were power grids, bank records, defense records, the Department of Justice's legal records. So that's what responsive does, right? They work to identify who, what, when, where, why. Why did this happen? How did it happen? Who was responsible? So that's kind of that part. So if you ever want to go into law enforcement, ever want to go into kind of the more investigative side of cybersecurity, that's probably your path. So these are some common roles you can find, right? So if you're looking at job titles, if you're looking at what role do I want to fit into a company, these are some very common ones. Again, there's hundreds. Every company names them their own. But intelligence, you're actively searching for threats. So these people are often called, analysts. There's incident response, which I just talked about, responding to security-related events. So if something happens, if there's a data breach, a hack, that's where incident response guys come in. Forensics is determining the cause and effect of the event. So every piece of malware, every hack, every person leaves a trace on a computer system. Forensics, their job is to go in, find that trace, and kind of follow the trail, right? So you watch those old school detective movies, they're looking for footprints on the ground, they're looking for hair, blood, whatever to identify the person. You can do the same thing when it comes to code and computers. That's what forensics do. Audit, that's just testing an environment to certify safety. So pen testing falls into that. Ethical hacking falls into that. Compliance falls into that. And then administrators is kind of more of a management role usually. But there are a lot of entry level positions in this too. So managing end users, taking a look at what the system at large looks like, and just protecting the company, right? So there's a saying in cybersecurity and in the computer industry in the whole, in any system, humans are the weakest link. So you kind of have to protect against humans because sometimes we do things we don't mean to, right? You might have somebody that accidentally tweets out their password to their computer instead of sending it in a text to somebody else. I don't know why you would do that anyways, but again, that's where administrators come into place. They're like, hey, you just tweeted out your password. You need to change that now, that type of thing. So that's the industry now. Again, this is the future as I see it. I'm not an oracle. I'm not a genius or anything like that. I don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. So don't take this, take this with a grain of salt, I guess. But we all know about remote work, right? I'm sure some of you on here are either working remotely yourselves, have parents that are doing it. You guys are probably doing school online. We're doing this entire thing online. So there's a lot of risk to organizations and companies as more and more people work remotely, because your own network may not be as safe as your company's network. You can use things like a VPN, you can use things like a firewall. But at the end of the day, having a distributed network causes a lot of issues. So that's where cybersecurity is, again, growing. If you listen to any of President Biden's speeches, when he talks about threats of the future, it's always cybersecurity. The State Department just created a new department that is working on creating cybersecurity legislation that's global, because again, you can't have a law that just works in the US and then doesn't work over in Europe or India or China or South America, whatever. Everyone's on the computer. Everything is kind of universal when it comes to technology. So we have to make sure that cybersecurity is universal too. Internet of Things, so that's commonly known as IoT, right? You guys probably have smart TVs. You probably have a car that's connected to the internet, maybe a fridge that's connected to the internet. Who knows, right? And we don't know what this is going to look like in the future, but any smart device creates a vulnerability on your network. So you have to make sure that you're including network connectivity in a safe way. We want everything to be connected, right? That's the end goal. That's the future everyone looks for because it creates ease and convenience. So, but we want to make sure we're doing it in a safe way. Social media, something I'm sure everyone is familiar with. Everyone probably has 2, 3, 4 accounts, but you guys have heard on the news the whole thing about TikTok. The reason TikTok's under scrutiny is because, again, of cybersecurity. Somebody went in and did an audit of TikTok and saw that they were taking large amounts of data that maybe they shouldn't have been. And again, that kind of goes back to the legal thing. It's legal to do this in China, but it's not legal to do this in the US. So, where's the gray area? Who owns the company? That's really a mess that I don't know that I'll ever touch, but it's something that you just think about, right? So when you're putting information out there about yourself, this used to be a thing that was said in every elementary school and middle school. I don't know if it still is, but the more information you put out there, the more you're putting yourself at risk. So I'll just give you a small example of something. I worked with a person earlier today. They tweeted out a lot about their favorite football team, right? They were like, this is my favorite football team. And you think that's harmless. What can somebody do with that information? But when we looked at their email account, their question to reset their password was, what was your favorite football team? So all I had to do to get into that person's email was look up their Twitter, find out that they were a fan of football team X, and put that answer into reset their password. Now, that's a serious security concern, but a lot of people don't think that way, right? And that's kind of where cybersecurity comes into play. It's like, hey, how can we educate general consumers to make sure that they're not putting themselves at risk through social media? And then another topic that everyone's talking about in the news is cryptocurrency, right? Cryptography is a huge part of cybersecurity, what cryptocurrency is based off of. So what they're called is decentralized financial systems, just looking at banks are centralized, but what happens when everyone has their own wallet? What happens when everyone's essentially their own bank? Is that safer? Is it more risky? That's something that's being looked at a lot before people actively start using Bitcoin to go buy a car or something like that, which I guess you can do now. You can go buy a Tesla with Bitcoin. But again, we have to do all that safely. So that is the future. And then these next two slides that I have are kind of, again, my ideas of what you can do to prepare yourself now, and how you can kind of get yourself into the cybersecurity field down the road. But because this field is changing every single day and every single year, some of this may just be moot, and it may not even make sense, 4 years down the road when you guys are graduating college. So um, some general skills that you can kind of look at, right? And it's again, I can't emphasize this enough. Just because you're good at interacting with technology does not mean that you're qualified to be in cybersecurity. A huge element of it is just working with people. So being able to sit down and explain to somebody why tweeting out their favorite football team is a risk takes a lot of skill and patience, right? So you have to be able to do that. But some hard skills, again, technical skills that you can use, the general understanding of computer programming. So coding, scripting, app development, that's going to take you a long way in cybersecurity because you have to know how these technologies are run, what's the root and the basis of the technology in order to protect it in the first place. So when I was in college, the first 2 years of classes were all related to coding and scripting. You can go advance in that if you want to go into app security, right? Actively protecting software, but a lot of people don't choose to do that. A general understanding of human psychology. So you might think, why is this important? Well, I had to take 3 classes on criminal psychology while I was in college. And that's because you have to understand how hackers work. You have to understand how these criminals really are operating and how they're convincing people to click on that link that says you get a free $1,000 and instead stealing their password, right? So if you don't understand how humans work, you won't be able to protect them from technology and protect technology from them. Proficient in network and systems engineering. So this is really just understanding how everything is connected, because your computer is connected to Wi-Fi, which is connected to a router, and that router is out in the expansive network environment of the world. So you will learn all that stuff in college. Again, I'm not saying you have to be an expert on it to go into this in college, but just having kind of an understanding of that will help, and will definitely get you further in college. And then proficient in technical writing and presentation. So I know this is something that's reinforced a lot in high school, which I'm glad it is, because when I was in high school personally, I knew I wanted to go into the tech field, and I never really saw the value in writing 15-page essays on a book that I read once. But it really does come in handy, because a lot of the work that you do in cybersecurity is just kind of documentation. So being able to write it and present those communications in an effective way to somebody else, whether that be management, a customer, stakeholder of some kind, is really important. And those presentations, present every chance you get. If you have the chance to be the person in class that stands up and gets to answer a question or lead a discussion, do it, because that's going to get you further in the field, really in any field, anything, right? Not just related to cybersecurity, any field. Leadership is a highly sought after skill. And then soft skills. What can you kind of just do as a person, changing your personality to kind of be ready for a field in technology? Adapting to a rapidly changing environment. If you're somebody that likes to go by the book, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but technology is probably not the route for you, right? Things have changed and things will continue to change. Nobody could have told you 2 years ago that everyone would be working remote. And that has created so many opportunities, but it's also created so many risks. And it's made it harder for a lot of people, but those people that are able to adapt are thriving right now. So that goes into that second one, ability to communicate effectively, right? In a rapidly changing environment, you are going to be talking to thousands of people a year. So if you can't communicate with all different types of people effectively, if you can't go to a 80-year-old person and explain to them how to safely use their email, and then go talk to a 15-year-old and tell them not to put something out on Twitter, that's going to hurt you in the industry. So you got to be able to cater to that wide range of audiences, different educational backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds. There's a lot that factors into that. That also goes to that human psychology thing at the top, right? Be able to work well under pressure. Cybersecurity, there's a lot of pressure there, right? I mean, if you're working at a bank, you're protecting a lot of financial records and potentially people's entire livelihoods. So just knowing that every single day going to work is a lot of stress, but it's just being able to handle that stress is a skill that I think is, something that you can really develop as a young adult or as a somebody going into college. And then working well with a team is critical. I don't think that I've ever heard of anyone in cybersecurity working alone, right? You might have those guys that are alone in their basement trying to break again into NASA, but they're the ones that again end up getting arrested. So if you can work well with a team, you will go much further in the field. And then some educational requirements, kind of again, how to prepare yourself. This one might sound weird, and you probably, maybe your parents say this to you every day. Read the news every single day. And the reason I say that is you will learn so much just from reading about what's going on out there in the world. And you don't have to, I'm not saying watch the weather report every night and understand that there's going to be snow tomorrow or something like that. I'm saying read the news that interests you, right? We have Twitter, Facebook, you probably have a news app on your phone. You can Google things, right? Just look up topics that interest you. What's going on. Like I said, you can Google data breach any given day, find a new article to read. How did it happen? What did it happen? What's the new technology advancements that are coming out? What research is being done? If you know these things, when you go into an interview and you're able to talk about them, they know you're somebody that's prepared to deal with an adapting environment or adapt with a changing environment, right? Develop your people skills. The easiest way to do that is talk to people. Don't be shy, make new friends, go to a new club and meet new people, go to a party if you want to and meet new people, join a sports team. That was something that really helped me, right? Is like I started out just joining a sports team when I was a kid, and I met tons of new people, made friends with them along the way, stayed in touch. And from there, that's where my people skills came from, I think. Find mentors or experts to learn from. So you guys are already a step ahead because you're on this call. And I have included my contact information on the next slide. So again, you can always reach back out to me, but it's really important to find a mentor or expert from, even if you don't want to go into cybersecurity, finding that right person that can help kind of share their experience with you is critical. I think a lot of people have a misconception that a mentor is going to be somebody that kind of leads you down a specific path. I don't think that's the right way to view a mentor, right? I think a mentor is somebody that can share their experiences with you and say, hey, this is kind of what my journey was. These were my failures that I experienced, and hopefully my lessons learned help you. So that's something that you should really look for. And whether that be a parent, a teacher, another role model, maybe even a peer that's just a mentor for you, that's somebody you want to find as soon as possible. These next two bullet points are kind of more, I guess, once you're really about to graduate or are in college. If you want to go into cybersecurity, start understanding the use of technology that interests you the most. So technology is in every single industry. Like I have a few listed there: finance, healthcare, government, right? People have this idea that, oh, if I go into tech, I'm going to end up working for Apple or Facebook or Microsoft. That is not the case. You could end up working for, honestly, a hospital. I have a roommate, and he works for Northwestern, the hospital system in Chicago, and he does security there. So if you are passionate about healthcare, but don't want to become a doctor maybe, or don't want to become somebody in the medical industry, you can still apply technology to that and, serve both passions of yours. So that's a way to do that. And then if you want to go into cybersecurity, because it's such a rapidly changing field, certifications are the biggest thing, right? So a few of them listed there: Security Plus, CISSP. CEH it actually stands for Certified Ethical Hacker. So if you want to be the person that is just sitting in your room and in your free time trying to break into different systems, make sure you get that certification first, because if you have it, it could probably save you from going to jail. So these are just some educational requirements. You can, again, everyone's journey is going to look a little bit different. I don't know where you guys are starting. I don't know your background, so I'm not going to have the one answer to kind of guide you all, but that's kind of all I have. So thank you for listening to that. Like I said, here's my contact information. You guys can reach me via email any day, really. I'll answer anytime I see it. And any of my social media, my handle is right there. So feel free to connect with me. Like I said, I just graduated in 2020. I'm a Matia Valley alumni. So if I can be of any help and help guide you guys, down a path or share my experiences with you, let me know. I'd love to do that because I am very grateful for all the help and guidance that I got. So, it's my turn to give back, and that's really what I'm here to do. But Dhruv, I'll hand it back to you if there's any questions, or if anyone has any questions, feel free to speak up, ask, and I'd be happy to answer.
For sure. Thank you so much, Dhruv, for the very insightful presentation and the very interesting statistics and stories that you brought up. I will open the floor first to the attendees. If you guys would like to ask any questions, you can put them in the chat or speak up.
Hi, I had a question. So like you said, like cybersecurity wasn't really a major for in your college until like pretty recently. So do you recommend that if like the college we're going to doesn't have that major to go into computer science and then get certifications for cybersecurity? Could that be a possible path?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one path you can take because it prepares you well. Um, in a lot of colleges, I know outright don't have cybersecurity majors, but there are some colleges where you can, within computer science itself, choose to specialize in security, right? So you might be constrained to application security when it comes around to jobs and interviews. You know, it might be a little bit harder to break into the forensics field or break into the incident response field, but certifications will obviously absolve that. So one thing I would also point out is that some of the certifications do take industry experience to acquire. So you might have to wait, 2 to 3 years, get 2 to 3 years of job experience after college before you're eligible to get a specific certification.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We have a question in the chat. What role or area are you planning on being part of moving forward? It's in the chat, so you can also see it as well.
Yeah, I think I can't see the chat with sharing my screen, so that might be it. But my end goal is eventually to get involved in government. I think there's a lot I can do and provide there because, like I said, there's really no streamlined guidance or legislation or really protection to the consumer. And I think that's the biggest threat moving forward, right? Is if we create this environment where everyone's doing things just a little bit differently, it creates those opportunities and those gaps and vulnerabilities for people with malicious intent to break in and harm individuals like ourselves. So um, I'm gearing my interests and my passions more towards developing policy and legislation. And that's why I'm in, kind of the audit sphere right now, because I want to understand every system inside and out, interact with different companies, see how they do things, and then hopefully take that experience to the next level.
Awesome. We have another great question in the chat. Did you do any internships? And if so, did they help you?
Yeah, so that's definitely an experience I can talk about. So my most recent internship was at Crowe, where I accepted full-time employment as well. But that it helps so much because that's where I was really able to find that that's what I wanted to do, right? And get into the audit sphere and kind of start working on different projects. One of the things I think that I was also able to find out very quickly was, I specifically was very interested in what's called PCI compliance, which is a very, again, specific portion and interest or part of the audit field, right? So PCI compliance stands for payment card industry. It deals with the security around credit cards. That's pretty much it, right? So anytime what we look at is when you go to the store, you go buy groceries and you swipe a credit card, that number gets sent from the register to a main server to another system and eventually gets to Visa or MasterCard or wherever who's putting up the money. So what does that process look like? Is it safe? Is everyone meeting the standards that we have outlined? And really just protecting consumers' credit card information. I think that's also where my passion for government kind of stemmed from, was understanding that there's no real protections when it comes to legal standpoint for these things. So how can we accomplish that? But I would say internships help, but if you can't find an internship in college, don't fret. Some of the jobs I've learned the most from were just simple retail jobs, right? In high school, I worked at a frozen yogurt shop that was called Lulu's. I don't think it's open anymore, but that's where I first started working. And that's where I learned how to just talk to people, right? And understanding what people wanted, dealing with people that might have been angry, dealing with people that were, sad or happy. It's just everything is a learning experience if you do it right. That's my take, and that's what I would give to you. But yes, internships do help, especially if you can get into the right company and into the right field. And one other thing I would caution you on is, everyone kind of wants to go for those high name internships like Facebook and Apple and, Microsoft. And I have nothing against these companies. I use their products every day. And, I will never speak ill of them. But what I would say is don't just do it for the name. Do your research on the company and see what they're doing. Is it actually something you're passionate about? Because if you just go there to put a name on your resume, it is not going to end well for you when it comes to a job interview, right? You won't be able to talk about it with passion and with interest. And somebody that's interviewing you will very clearly be able to see that. And they'll know that you're just kind of somebody that likes to check boxes. And if that's who you are, you might not be the best fit for that company.
Yeah.
So just make sure you keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Dhruv. Like, you should do things that you're really passionate about, because if you just do it for the resume, then it's not going to really benefit you, because you won't be able to passionately talk about it. And along with we have another question about, like, when did you get your first internship?
Yeah, so mine, believe it or not, was right before I graduated. So the semester before I graduated was my first actual cybersecurity internship. Before that, I did some technical work, that wasn't really related to cybersecurity, but I waited 3 years till I found the right internship, and I took it, and that's where I'm working full time now. So, like I said, if you don't find the right thing, find your own experience. You can get involved in research, and I personally had a little bit of a gap before I started working full time, and you mentioned this at the very beginning, but that's where I decided to start my own company. And the idea of the company is to bridge the gap between all the different technologies that students use and make their college experiences better. So the company's thriving. That's where I was before this. We just had a quick meeting that I had to go to, but you can always do things that are bettering yourself. I think internships are fantastic and everyone should do them. But like I said, everything's a learning experience if you do it right.
Yes, indeed. So along with internships, did you do any volunteering or clubs in high school? Any extracurricular activities that shaped your perceptions toward pursuing a cybersecurity field?
Yeah, I don't know if I did any specific technical volunteering or anything like that. I was involved in a lot of things in high school, and I think, I don't know how many people here go to Mattia, but again, that's where I graduated from. And I think Mattia is very unique in that there's so many opportunities for you to get involved at Mattia. You just really have to look, and then it comes down to that cliche saying of what you put in is what you get out, right? So I was, like I said, involved in sports in high school. That I fully credit being involved with sports in high school in teaching me how to work in a team, right? I don't think I would have been able to work well in a team in college if I hadn't played team sports in high school. So again, nothing technical that I did, but it was a learning experience for me. Other things I was involved in was just like going to football games and cheering on the team. And I think it was called it was like the student section. I don't remember what it's called, Stampede, something like that. So I was involved in that, and that was a fun experience, right? Just kind of like a creative outlet, involved in orchestra at Mattia, like that. That's just something that takes your mind off of things, because you'll realize you get very burnt out if you just stare at a computer screen all day. So having other interests and having other passions is always a good thing. I think the other thing that really helped me get into the cybersecurity field. So like I said, it's an emerging field, right? And the nature of any emerging field is that there are very few experts, there are very few mentors. So a lot of people, I don't remember who asked the question, but she said, what do you do if there's no cybersecurity major at your college? A lot of people in industry right now that are working these jobs at management levels never had a formal cybersecurity education, right? They went to school learning about, looking back at like the 90s, right? They learned something called COBOL. That language isn't even used anymore in programming. I mean, aside from some government legacy systems, but everything has changed since then. Smartphones weren't a thing. IoT wasn't a thing. Cryptocurrency wasn't a thing. So these people are the people in management now never had that formal education. So something that really prepared me to go in an emerging field was finding every leadership opportunity I could. So in college, any club I joined, I did so out of interest first, but then I also looked at how do I get involved in the leadership? How do I, shape the direction of this organization in the way that I want it to be, in the way that I think is most effective and most beneficial to everyone. And that's really what cybersecurity comes down to, is how do I implement and develop a plan that's going to be benefiting the most amount of people and at the same time protecting the most amount of people. So if you can't think like a leader, then it's again really going to hinder you in the field, and really when it comes to technology in general, because if you want to stay at the forefront of your career for the next 25 years, you're going to have to be somebody that is leading the field when technology changes. You don't want to be giving up jobs to college graduates that are coming in with more experience and expertise than you. So I would say find your passions, find your interests, and get involved in that. Another thing I volunteered for was Boys and Girls Club. I don't know if that's a thing in Illinois. I know it's a thing in Indiana, which is just hanging out with kids that can't go home after school, and so that helps you develop your people skills when you have to interact with kids from 4 to 12 or 13 and just hang out with them all day. So you can do anything, and like I said, what you put into it is what you get out of it.
Right. So one attendee is curious to know whether cybersecurity is limited only to healthcare or other fields.
No, it's related. It's cybersecurity is in every field. You will find every organization, probably at least in America, probably has 1 or 2 people that are doing cybersecurity for that organization. So if you're interested in healthcare, yeah, healthcare is a huge opportunity. Finance is a huge opportunity, right? Every bank is looking to protect their systems and get into things. You can do defense work, so that's working for the government, defense contractors. So there's a new branch of the military created a few years ago called Space Force, right? So the Space Force actually also oversees what's called cyberspace, so anything that has to do with the internet. They're hiring people in the military to do cybersecurity. So if you ever want to go the military route and serve your country, there are roles for cybersecurity there. If you're interested in space, cybersecurity is a huge thing up there too, believe it or not, because satellites, they transmit information all the time, right? Every internet provider has a satellite in the sky, and they have to know how to protect those from hacks, because if somebody can hack into a satellite and move it, X degrees out of position, and an entire segment of the state of Illinois loses internet connectivity, that's a huge issue. So it's not just related to one field. You can find any field you're interested in and do it. Actually, I do have a good story about that too. I think we have a little bit of time. So I had a friend, and his dream job in college was to design cars. He wanted to design cars for Corvette, or wanted to design the new Corvette. And he very quickly realized that, he wasn't as apt as he needed to be at, things like physics and math and things like that. So he was like, I'm good with computers. I'm going to go into a computer major. Joined cybersecurity, and, had an internship and, graduates. And now he's working for Ford doing cybersecurity for them, because he is developing security for those consoles that get stuck in the middle of the car that have your GPS, your text messages, your music, everything in there. So you can have any interest in the world, and cybersecurity will apply to it. That much I can promise you.
Wow, that just goes to show how versatile cybersecurity is and how it's applicable in almost every field that you can think of.
Yeah.
It's very incredible. We have a good question in the chat as well. What does your average day look like right now?
So I split my time between my startup and doing some certifications that I'm working on. So honestly, probably like most years does, I study a lot. I can show you. I have so here's the book that I'm working on. It is a 1,000-page book for the certification I'm working on. So yeah, a lot of studying, but average day, let's see, I wake up in the morning, read the news. That, like I said, that's the first thing I do. Understanding what's going on in the world will always help you in any kind. If anything, just making small talk during work calls. Finding time for yourself. So for your own interest, if you have your own passions, your own interests, making time for yourself to do that. As far as work duties go, it looks different for every role that you're in. So when it comes to things like IT assurance or audit, a lot of your work is client facing. So you're going to be on the phone, or in this case on Zoom, a lot with people at other companies. So, a lot of it is interviewing those people and asking them, hey, how do you deal with incident X? How do you deal with incident Y? Documenting it, making sure they're meeting certain standards, meeting their own standards, Are they doing things in a safe way? And then a lot of writing. So typing all this stuff up into reports, making sure it's all documented well, reading different diagrams and kind of putting explanations into them so other people can understand them. So yeah, it's a lot of typing, and things are different because of COVID. So everyone's still remote, and no one's in person yet. But um, if you're interested in the audit field specifically, I haven't done this yet, but a lot of people that I've worked with, they talk about travel. So it's a high travel intensive field. You get to go to a lot of cool places, meet a lot of cool people, go to, places like one of the bigger clients for Crowe is Disney. So they go to a lot of the Disney parks and do audits there, which is kind of fun, right? And you get to go back to Disney as an adult and just you're working there. It's pretty cool. But yeah, your day will depend on the role that you have in cybersecurity. If you're an incident response, I have a friend who does that, and he sometimes has to work until 3 a.m. and then doesn't work at all the next day. So it's really, really variable, I think is the best way to put it. My day is different every day, which makes it exciting too.
Awesome. One person was just quickly curious about the name of the company you interned.
Yeah, so it's Crowe. It was on that first slide, CROWE. They are actually an accounting firm by practice, I think. But the department that I worked in there was IT assurance. So that is essentially what becomes audit, but it's not really an audit because there are financial audits, which mean a completely different thing. But it's reviewing different systems, documentation, making sure things are compliant. So yeah, that can go. I can send you an email with all the information. You can blast it out to everyone if you like.
For sure. We also have another question in the chat. It's a really good one. Is the career math heavy?
No, it's not, thankfully, because I'm not good at math myself. So it's not math heavy unless you really go into application security, where you're dealing more with programming. You might deal more with math there, but I would say again, it's such a tough thing to kind of answer and explain because every field looks a little bit different. So, there is a whole field of cybersecurity that revolves around data, which that is extremely math heavy. You have to do several stats classes to, get into that field. You might have to take some base level calculus, things like that, but it's not, as math heavy as being a math major. So if your concern is math, there's ways to get into cybersecurity and not have to do math. And, that's the route I chose to personally take because again, math is not my strong suit.
All right. So another question, those statistics that you brought up in the presentation, are there some journals that students can find and read that provide like similar statistics?
Yeah. So there's a lot of I don't know that there's specific journals, but what I can tell you is every year there's different reports that come out, right? So there's certain departments within the government that put out different statistical reports that you can find online. They're all free, and you can download a PDF, and it talks about the most common vulnerabilities, most common breaches, how much did it cost, what was was there a physical toll there? Because sometimes when these data breaches do happen, unfortunately, people do face physical harm, right? And it can cost lives and things like that. So the government keeps track of a lot of that. But there are also a lot of industry reports. So there's a leading company when it comes to security that everyone's probably heard of called Symantec. So a lot of you probably have Norton antivirus software on your machines. Symantec is the one that designed that. So they put out every year a report as well about what did the different threat levels look like. So was it malware? Was it ransomware? What flavor of ransomware? What type of ransomware? There's so many different viruses. So there's a virus called WannaCry, and if you look that up, WannaCry was one of the most prevalent pieces of malware that was affecting the entire world, right? And it was being distributed from a massive ring of people around the world. So nobody really knew where it came from and who was benefiting from it. So it was kind of a difficult thing to determine, but when they eventually found who did it, they actually just busted the entire ring that was providing and supporting WannaCry. So this was after billions had been lost in financial damages, and people have been scammed out of tons of money. But again, that's something Semantic talked about was, hey, WannaCry is gone, but something else has taken its place, right? So you cut off one head, two are going to grow back, right? And it's just hard to keep up with, but there's a lot of industry reading reports. I can't think of any off the top of my head specifically as far as journals go, but you can always read, different beta test reports from companies about where they identify their own threats. There's a really good website that I'll have to send you that I can't remember off the top of my head, but they basically assess different threat levels on a matrix and kind of identify them for people. So it'll tell you like, hey, if you're using Windows XP, you're at major risk because all these vulnerabilities exist and they are no longer being patched by Microsoft, right? So there's a website that does that, and there's a lot of tools out there, but I don't know of any journals specifically.
Oh, yep, no worries. So, if you're a high school student who has very basic computers experience, do you still have a shot in the cybersecurity field?
Yeah, absolutely. This was something I never really, I guess, so I didn't talk about this during, and that's my fault for during the presentation, but I never took a CS class until high school or until college, I'm sorry. So I never really knew what I was getting into. And the reason I took a CS class in college, my second semester freshman year, was because I was in the engineering program at Purdue. And so CS is one of the base fundamental classes. I didn't even know I really liked computers until then. And that's why I say you guys are already steps ahead of the game. If you're coming to different talks, and trying to find the field that interests you, it shows that you guys are motivated. But yeah, limited computer exposure is no problem at all. I mean, if you know how to use the computer at a basic level, you are qualified to learn about cybersecurity and eventually go into the field, right? You don't have to be an expert by any means. People unwittingly are contributing to cybersecurity every day, right? Anytime you turn on two-factor authentication for your email, you're kind of engaging in cybersecurity at the most fundamental and basic level. So if you can understand those different concepts and kind of apply them to different things, that's when you have a career there. But yeah, if you're worried about your experience, don't be. They prep you well in college for everything. Like I said, I never took a CS class until 2017, and 3 years later, here I am in the industry.
Yep. Did you do any minor in college? The person who asked this question is interested in going in the government route. Do you think that a minor in international relations can help with cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. So whoever asked this question, I would recommend you look up the statement that came out from the Department of Defense the State Department early in January. So they've put together a department within the State Department, and the pure purpose of that department is to work with other countries to build cybersecurity guidelines and framework for the entire world, right? So this is a project that's going to go on for years. Personally, my major was similar. My minor was similar to that. I couldn't get into international relations, with my course load and just the timing and everything. So I was in religious studies. And the reason I took that was because I wanted to further enhance my understanding of people and my understanding of cultures and how we could effectively communicate to different cultures that, there's some religions out there or some communities out there where technology is kind of taboo, right? And they don't use technology as much as we do, maybe in a Western society. So how do you effectively communicate to those people that may just have just a bank account online that, hey, you still have to be safe, right? You're still at risk. So I think there's a lot of minors that can help. If you're looking at a minor, definitely don't do another minor related to computers. My second major was in management. So it's a business related major. It has nothing to do with computers. But again, that's because I want to go into that industry and be a leader in that industry. So yes, international relations is fantastic. Definitely look up that, State Department memo, do some research there. And if you can get involved, they have a lot of opportunities to get involved in the U.S. government right now. So it's a fantastic time to be looking at that.
Awesome. Those are two very interesting minors, Dhruv. A student was also wondering if you happen to know any general sources that explain different fields of computer science, some general education sources.
Yeah.
Computer science, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. So there's, Here's what I would say. I don't know that there's one centralized resource, right? Because everyone's going to explain it in a different way. If you, um, go find another person in cybersecurity tomorrow, they might tell you that everything I've told you today is completely incorrect, and this is the future of cybersecurity. So, what I would suggest doing is actually going and looking up job postings for different companies, right? So, if you're interested in computer science specifically, software programming, let's say go on Google, look up software programming, and look at all the different roles that come up. And look at every role will have a paragraph or two that says, hey, this is what we're looking for in a candidate, and this is what your responsibilities are going to be. And that is going to give you a really good idea of what you would be doing every single day in that role. So the same thing applies to cybersecurity, right? If you want to go into intelligence, you can look up those roles at any company. You could even look it up on Google and look at, like, this is what I would do at Apple. This is what I would do at Crowe. This is what I would do, at a smaller firm like Red Hat or something like that. I don't know that there's a centralized resource. The one that comes to mind is YouTube. You can look this up on YouTube and find some pretty fantastic videos of people immensely more qualified than myself talking about the field. But what I did personally was I just looked at job postings. And I did this as a freshman in college and knowing that I was 4 years away from getting a job. And that's when I realized, I didn't want to go into engineering because what they had posted on the websites was not for me. So that's when I switched my field to cybersecurity. I looked at job postings and I was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. And I geared all my, education towards that. And I'm happy with where I'm at.
That's great to hear. A student was curious to learn more about ethical hacking and what exactly that is. Could you
Yeah.
to that?
So there are a couple different ways ethical hacking works and that you can get involved. So the first and most commonly known is you're somebody that's highly skilled and highly knowledgeable, and you're just doing this stuff for fun, right? So that means that you can go on any major company's website. It's usually major companies that offer this. Anyone that has kind of a mass consumer product, and what I mean by that is like Windows, Apple, even Netflix might have some. I don't know really, but looking at these bigger companies and looking for what's called bug bounties. So bug in the most basic sense is any basically issue with the software, right? And so ethical hackers learn how to exploit those bugs to get into a system where they're not supposed to have access. So to give you an example, what it could be is I know, now that I've graduated, I know how to do some basic hacking. And I would go on, Microsoft's website and find out that they have a bug in Windows, or they have a bug bounty posted for $10,000. So I would start running scans, tests, different things, doing different things on a Windows machine to find any system flaws. If I found one and properly documented it, I could then submit that to Microsoft and they would pay me the $10,000 for finding that flaw. And then their own software developers would fix that issue. And then that's when you get the update on your computer that says, hey, you need to update your Windows system. It's out of date now. The other form of ethical hacking is what's called penetration testing. So this is a rapidly growing field, and there's a lot of demand for it, especially at financial institutions specifically. What this basically means is you are employed by the company and your job every single day is to try to break into that company. So they will not give you any passwords. They won't give you any access. You'll be just like an outsider, and your job is to just try to break into the company. And every time you find an issue, a flaw, something you're able to exploit, that you report that to your manager, you report that to the rest of your team, and they fix it. So ethical hacking, what it really is if you're interested in the purest sense, just hacking, that's the route to go. And again, you can get that certification. It's called CEH, Certified Ethical Hacking. And if you want to, engage in bug bounties or in penetration testing, most companies will require you to have that on file before they pay you, because that way they know you're legit and you've gone through ethical training, which is a huge part. And, that's again, going back to my minor, religious studies, ethics is a huge part of cybersecurity. And ethics is becoming a huge part in technology, because how do we ethically deploy technology, without stealing people's personal information, their data? So you really have to remember that the most fundamental part of ethical hacking is the ethical part. Anyone can hack, but whether you're doing it ethically or not is the real question. If that doesn't answer your question, just, hit me with a clarification question and I can try to elaborate more.
Yeah. So speaking of certifications, do you currently have any certifications? And if so, like what is the process to gain a certification?
Yeah, so I don't have any in particular right now. So the one that I'm working on is a CISSP. It's called a CISP. Um, it's honestly, it's like taking the ACT. You study for it. Go into depth in different things. So in the CISP, there's a whole section about like biometric security. So you have to understand and how does fingerprint scanning work, retinal scanning work, voice activation work. And then you take a test, and the certification usually lasts 2 to 3 years if you pass. And then you have to take the test again in 3 years. And that's purely because the industry is changing so fast. So I'm currently working on the CISP and my Security Plus, which is what's called a stackable certificate from CompTIA. So if you ever want to engage in government work, I know somebody asked that question, you're probably going to be asked to provide, documentation that you have a stackable certificate set, and that's going to depend on the role that you go in. So what I mean by that is Security Plus is just one certificate, but you can get others on top of that make you a more advanced practitioner. And if you want to do government work at a higher level, a lot of them require you to have that in place. So, I wouldn't worry about that now if you're not about to graduate college, because a lot of these, a lot of the stuff I'm learning, or that I'm going over again in the CISP book, I learned in college. So certificates were made for those people that didn't go through a formal cybersecurity education, and to make sure that they are qualified to work in the industry. But if you're going to a cybersecurity major, don't worry about it until you're a senior in college. You'll get I had a whole class where the textbook was literally just a certification study guide. So you'll get all that experience through your pure education.
What are some of the specific technologies that you use? Like, do you use coding languages like Python or Java or C++?
Yeah. So again, if you're going into application security, C is going to be huge. A lot of the rest of what we do is in Java. So a lot of my, college classes utilize Java. The technologies, as far as technologies, here's a thing a lot of people overlook is you have to get yourself very familiar with the 3 main different flavors of operating systems. Because anytime you interact with the system environment, chances are that you probably are going to come across computers that you're not familiar with how to use. And what I mean by that is, most people have a preference whether they go Windows or Apple, but there is a whole nother subset out there called Linux. So Linux is like Ubuntu, Kali Linux, things like that. And a lot of back-end systems at corporations operate on that, basis. So I had a ton of classes that taught me purely how to use Linux and how to, deploy different packages across that, and how to use them in different system environments. So you definitely want to get familiar with the 3 main operating systems you'll interact with. And then if you want to, kind of keep up with the trend of the industry, coding languages to look at, right? Like React Native. Those are the 2 new up and coming programming languages. You want to look at, IoT connections. So there's different protocols that go into connecting things like smart devices to your network. In cybersecurity, I guess the best way to put it is you have to be familiar with all sorts of technology at a fundamental level. So you'll have to have good understanding of how does a network work? How does a firewall work? How does, a basic computer work in Windows, Mac, Ubuntu, Linux? You want to also have good understanding of how does your iPhone work? How does an Android phone work? What are the differences between the 2? I could go on for days about the technology to use, but again, it's going to change, within 2 years. So that's where reading the news comes in handy. If somebody comes out with a new operating system that's being adopted by every, car manufacturer in the world, you're probably going to want to read up on that and just have a basic understanding, because chances are you will interact with it at some level, whether it's firsthand or second.
Right. All right. Now we'll be down to our final question, and I'm sure that this is in the minds of our attendees. Like, what are some of the projects what are some of the projects that you have worked on, and have you ever hacked a website?
So So some of the cooler projects that I've definitely gotten to work on were, I'm new in my career path in the industry itself. So some of the cooler projects I think I've worked on were in college. Um, Last semester, I got to take two classes. One was they were both graduate level classes. So one was based on Homeland Security, and the other one was based on malware forensics. So I think malware forensics was definitely one of the coolest classes I've ever taken because the idea there was we created what was called sandbox environments, right? So what a sandbox environment is it's a virtual closed environment where you are deploying a computer system that your goal is then to hack and destroy. So we worked with a lot of different viruses and malware that are very, very destructive. So it was kind of scary, to be honest. Like, you're deploying a virus that if you accidentally deploy it on your own machine, your personal machine, you will probably lose your entire life's work. So um, getting to do that was really cool because, I mean, who doesn't get to enjoy destroying a computer system completely? And then, the education part of that was performing forensics on it and understanding that. And the other cool projects, honestly, that I got to work on were purely research based. I love learning about new things and new topics, and a lot of the psychology research that we did was really, really interesting. So I had a class in my final semester as well where I wrote a paper that focused on how foreign governments were able to use social media to directly influence voting in the United States. And that's something that was talked a lot about in 2016, talked a little bit less about in 2020. But it's still a topic that a lot of people talk about because social media is such a powerful tool, but it's also a powerful weapon. So right now there's legal protections that protect companies like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. No one really uses LinkedIn in that sense, but these larger companies that if something happens on their platform, they're not held liable. My argument and my research was surrounded around the fact that there are proven you know, proven examples of foreign governments directly using these platforms to promote terror and to promote crime and violence in other countries, not just the United States. There was a bombing that happened in Israel several years ago, and it was completely orchestrated through Facebook. The entire thing was perpetuated, planned, and organized through Facebook. And the courts said, "Hey, Facebook's not responsible," even though there were hundreds of people dead. And so you look at these things and you look at technology, and it really does have an impact in real life, right? There's no such thing anymore as a separation between your life off the internet and your life on the internet. The whole thing's intertwined. If we're looking at things like, the power grid failing in Texas right now, people are out of water, they're out of food. I think a couple, dozen people have died at this point, and that is a technological failure. And that happened because of the weather, and thankfully is not the right word, but thankfully it wasn't malicious intent. But somebody with malicious intent could make that happen in any state. You can take down a power grid system if you have the resources and the tools at your disposal. So research has been my favorite project I've worked on. As far as hacking a website, no, I have not hacked a website that you would use on a daily basis. I have hacked a website in a closed educational environment, and again, that's because I don't want to go to jail. And you can do it. So if you set up your own website and you have your own server, or you have a friend that does it, and you can go hack the website, right? And as long as they give you permission to do it, you can do it. I still would never recommend it, but there's so many tools out there that you can start playing with. There's one called Wireshark. If you're ever interested at what other people are doing on your network, again, please do not use this on other people because it is a huge violation of privacy and you will get in a lot of trouble for it. But Wireshark is a tool that allows you to see what other people are doing. So what websites are they going to? What text are they sending? Text messages? Are they downloading emails? Things like that. So if you want to run that on your home's environment, you can see that. You can see what are your parents doing? What are your siblings doing? If you have a friend connected to your environment. But again, please use it in a safe way. And somebody did ask about technology, and here's one thing I would say to look into is Kali Linux. Some of my favorite projects I worked on revolved around Kali Linux. It's spelled Kali and then just Linux. It is a operating system that is purely developed for cybersecurity. So if you ever want to get into ethical hacking, penetration testing, anything like that, that is a place to start. The resources there are endless. I believe it is free, and you can do a lot with that tool. But again, do so in a safe way, set up virtual environments. Never, ever, ever use your own machine. I cannot emphasize this enough. I know way too many people that have tried to do things that they're just messing around with and have just completely destroyed their own computers. And then you have to go out and buy another $2,000 computer or whatever. I can tell you your parents won't be happy. You won't be happy. It's just going to kind of be losses all around. So do it in a safe way. And if you ever need to know how to do something in a safe way, again, I'll share my contact information on the screen. So you guys are welcome to, yeah, somebody just said it, use a VM. There's so many free VM tools. You can use VirtualBox from Oracle. You can use VMware. You want to make sure that you're running it on a bare metal environment. Don't ever do it on your own machine. But I will share my contact information when I can figure out how to share my screen. But can't figure that out. I just talked about technology and I can't figure out how to share my own screen. So that's where we are. But there we go. So yeah, I'll go ahead and share my contact information again. Again, if you want to get involved or started in cybersecurity and you're not there in college yet and you're just kind of looking to mess around and play with things, always please feel free to email me, or again, my social media is on there. You can DM me on anything. But if you want to email me, I can help you, point you in the right direction. Happy to make sure you don't get arrested. I'm not a lawyer, so if you do get arrested, I cannot help you. But I want to prevent that from happening. So yeah, please reach out to me, and definitely ask more questions if I didn't get to your question, or if you couldn't ask one now. I'd be happy to help and provide guidance as well.
For sure. Thanks for your insight. I'll just stop the recording.